I don't think we should bypass the process.
What are the rest of the members of the board?
Well, if I
You were
may,
there.
that was it. But I think we have to get Mr. Callagy's question answered. I think that's important before we, because
Which is,
the question, is it 10% plus 325, or is it 325 and the 10%? I read the letter, and I honestly now am not sure.
it's not the 10% plus
I'm
300,000.
not arguing that it is. I'm not arguing that it is. I just,
The FY02 final budget was 5,386,184. The housing gross budget is 5,386,151. They took the high growth aid that was in the FY02 budget. It looks like they put it in the chapter 7. That's what I'm looking at for this year. Is that what happened?
That's
Is that what the, okay. So that's what the, so chapter 70 increased, but they took away the high growth aid? Is that?
Basically, what happened is what you received in total gross chapter 70 in FY02, you're receiving a total gross amount in FY03 the same.
Total gross receipts, all local aid, including, which includes chapter 7, is the same year over year in the house budget.
That's correct, because they added up the 118, which was a separate chapter 7 appropriation from last year. They added it together to make your
For
chapter
this year's
7.
chapter 7.
But you have the same total chapter 70 amount that you had the year before, on the House side, not on the Senate side. The Senate side is higher. The House side is the same as it was appropriated last year.
And again, we're not authorizing anyone to spend anything. I wanted to know if they could plan that way. There's consensus of the committee to let them plan that
I
way.
want to plan that, not spend, but plan, if it happened.
And it's, yeah, just one more quick thing. And it's likely that chapter 70 funding may not go through the same process because it didn't go through the same process last year. Mrs. Bailey.
Plan means just that, plan, not spend. And
That's right.
Could that, they then could use those plans to answer Mr. Callagy's questions of what do you plan to do with that money without planning. They don't know what they'll do with their money, so I think far be it for us to tell anyone not to plan, you know, or predict what they would do with the money. So I would support them certainly planning, and then I would support whatever process we feel is necessary to go through, that should it by the end of this month become evident what monies are going to be available, that we realize that they do need to open school in September, and that we do need to, you know, make every legal effort to give them, to allow the funds that are there, and that, you know, we feel comfortable with them spending, you know, to be able to spend that when the funds come, in anticipation of opening school. It's not going to do the same good in November or December. Again, you know, I'm not saying skirt the process, but for us to make the process,
Well, and
to the extent possible, fit the timeline of an academic school year. So I don't know that I'm saying anything different than, you know, than you said, but I just think we have to be sensitive to the time. Fine.
Right, but if it's it's a consensus of the board that if we get additional, I'm just throwing it out, we get additional state aid, and we don't want to spend any of it on anything anywhere, then that's different from a planning perspective. Which really gets to the second point is, and I know from talking to various members over the past couple of months, what, if any, I mean, we have our own planning to do if there's additional state aid. Do we want, what do we intend to do with those funds? And then if we intend to do something with those funds, that's subject to appropriation at town meeting. Whereas, again, back to the language that's in the Senate's budget, not in the House budget, but likely to come out of the conference, is because of the timing of the budget, et cetera, that Chapter 70 funding, which is school funding, is likely to have the language attached to it so that it doesn't have to go through town meeting. And we're going to need to make a decision on that issue as well. So those are the two issues I need to, from the finance planning team, in addition to Mr. Younger and Mr. Dow working on the budget process. Take a look at this booklet to see if you like any of that and get back to me. That's thing one. And then thing two was, from a planning perspective, what are the thoughts of the board? If the budget comes out of the out of the conference or out of the governor's office in July. I think obviously one of the things that will be required is, and that's why they want to do their planning based on additional Chapter 78 on the House budget side, so that they can have a plan, and then we should develop a plan, and then Finance Committee needs to look at it, and then we have a joint meeting about what do we, what would each group think we should do? Save it all, save some, spend it all. What,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Calvin?
if you're asking us now for consensus of whether they should plan, why is that necessary? If this is a non-binding, here's my point. I'm not going to sit here tonight and say, yeah, go plan, and then a month down the road, have someone turn around and say, well, you told us to go spend the money.
Well, Mr.
And
Calvin.
I think there are questions that need to be asked that have not been asked in this budget process from the start. And I will not go along with any consensus, or I will not be part of a consensus saying, go ahead and plan, when I have questions that I want to have answered in terms of the budget and money that's to be appropriated. And I think we're bypassing our responsibilities in doing that.
I respectfully disagree, and I think it's appropriate for me to raise the issue before the board this evening, because if the collective wisdom of this board is to tell them not to plan, then they should not plan. If the collective wisdom of the board is any additional state funds are just that, additional state funds, and will revert to free cash at the end of the year, I think I'd like to have a sense now that that's the direction the board is going in. If the board would like to develop plans for appropriating additional state aid, I think we need to begin to develop plans for appropriating additional state aid. That's a function of the board. I think it's appropriate for me to ask for that consensus. If Mr. Muldoon says I don't want to spend any, and Mrs. Bailey says I don't want to spend any, and the chair is sitting here saying I don't want to spend any, then that's a different level of communication. Then, okay, yeah, they should plan on the Chapter 70 in the House budget, and we need to plan on our budget, which is really what I want to get to.
But the part we're leaving out in that scenario is, do you want to plan to spend that money? The answer to that question could be, not until I have more information. I haven't been in these meetings. I don't have that information. I need information before I can make that kind of a decision.
Mr. Vito.
If I may, thank you. I understand Mr. Callagy's concerns, but I have no problem with allowing them to plan, not to spend. I'm not giving them authorization
I'm
to
not
spend.
authorizing
No,
anybody
no,
to spend
no,
anything.
No, Mr. Chair, I understand. Just like I'm not authorizing us to spend any money. But I would like to see us have a plan too, if we do get not extra, if we do receive monies back from the state. I personally, I don't see anything wrong with them setting up a plan and us setting up a plan. Then if we have questions as to their plan, we could ask it. Right now, I can't ask the question on their plan because I don't know what their plan is.
That's right.
I just,
Right, but if you don't want to spend any money at all, that's a different,
right.
we're in a different place.
And I'm not saying that.
Right.
I'd like to do a plan with the board.
Mr. Mulder.
Mr. Chairman, to answer your two questions, I would agree to let them plan, go ahead and plan on the money available. As far as philosophy on the town side, I just realized that we are in bad economic times, that this town has gone through a lot of problems as far as operating budget and whatever. I tend to be very conservative. I want to, not to say that I won't agree to spend money on anything, but I tend to lean towards being conservative in the savings side and not be quick to spend the other money that we may receive unless it is for a good reason.
Thank you.
Yes, to try to answer your question succinctly as well. I think that we should support the school committee planning as we ourselves should plan. We agreed, as you said, it was a consensus to split it 60-40. So I don't know that for us to go back on the consensus now and say, we say we're not going to split it, we're not going to spend any of it, which essentially says we're not going to split it, doesn't seem quite right. So I would support the school committee going ahead with the plan and sharing it with us. As for our 40%, I agree with Mr. Muldoon. I would like to be conservative, not automatically plunk it back into any of the operating budgets, to especially look at perhaps one-time expenditures that in the long term could make us more efficient or save us money for next year and subsequent years.
Mr. Mead.
I think the thing that the board has to be careful of, and I know you're aware of this, is that, and I'm not saying to spend this money frivolously. I think we have to look at it very carefully, to put some items back, possibly, but to not spend the money where we need it, I want to say that, where we need it, would be a mistake. Because if we go into town meeting with that money unspent, it's up for grabs. So if we have areas of our budget where we feel we need it, I am going to support to spend it there. Because it'll be up for grabs. If not. And I think everyone knows I am going to look towards the trash fee for some of this money. If in fact we do get some of these in return.
To apply it to reduce revenue.
Yes. Yes, I would. Strongly. They lose, but strongly.
Okay. Why don't we put the budget on the next agenda? Members disagree with this, chime in based on the feedback. Why don't we look at some different scenarios? What are the one-time charges, i.e. capital perhaps, that we took out